What's up, everyone? You're listening to Our Children, Our Future. This is the podcast for parents to know everything they need to be aware of for their children's future. Those who are concerned with the world they're going to leave behind for their children, this is your place. This episode, we're talking about lemons. When life gives you lemons, what do you do? Well, I'll tell you what this woman does. This woman was saying that when life gives her lemons, she said she was in her kitchen with a friend over, and she had opened her refrigerator, and her friend saw in the refrigerator a bag of lemons and asked her, "Why do you have a bag of lemons in your fridge?" And she said, "Oh, because I like to cook with lemons and I use a lot of lemons." And the friend said, "But why do you have a bag of lemons in your fridge?" And she said, "Because I like to cook." What are you talking about? I told you I use a lot of lemons in my cooking." And she said, "But why do you have a bag of lemons in your fridge that you bought?" And she said, "I buy lemons because I cook." And she was getting frustrated. And she said, "But you have a lemon tree outside." And the woman said, "Okay, your point." And she said, "Why would you buy lemons when you have a lemon tree in your backyard?" And she said, "Well, don't you have to do something to the lemons in order to eat them, or in order to cook with them, or in order to use them?" And she said, "What? No, you can just pick them off the tree. They're ripe, they're good. You can use them, you can eat them." And this woman was dumbfounded. She said, "I can't be the only one who thought you had to do something before you could eat the fruits from a tree." She really believed that you had to do some sort of processing or something that some company takes care of that is too complicated for her to do, or too much for her to learn, right? And I just found that so interesting because this woman was a millennial, so she's an adult, right? It's not like she's a young child or a teenager, even, or in her early 20s. She's at least, in her later 20s. And so I find that super interesting because, well, she makes a good point. How many people out there don't know that actually? How many adults out there are completely unaware that you can just eat fruit from trees? Now, certain fruits, sure, I guess you'd have to do something, but that's very rare, right? It's more often, more likely that if you see an apple growing on a tree, you can just pick it and eat it. If you see a peach, or if you see a plum, or if you see a lemon or a mango, so long as it's ripe, you can pick it and eat it. And this would seem like common sense. However, over the years, our generations have gotten less and less common sense. They've gotten less and less intelligent. And I don't think it's something in the human brain that we're deteriorating. No, I can see really plainly what the problem is. It's our education system. Our education system, every year, every generation, it's worse and worse. They teach less and less. Everyone becomes aware that, well, it's not as important to focus on this stuff at school than what's going to be in real life. And here's the thing. In the past, you may have heard some people saying, "Well, you can just use a calculator, and so you don't really need to know all this math stuff. You don't really need to know basic math even. You can just use a calculator." But the problem is, what happens when that calculator fails? What happens when the politician that you've trusted? I hear people talking all the time about, at some point there will be technology that can read to you. We have that technology right now. It exists today. Technology can read to you. And so, technically speaking, you don't need to learn to read with your own physical eyes. And that's what a lot of people are making the argument for. But actually, think about that. Think about that for just a moment. How do you know if this technology reading to you is actually giving you what's written in the text, is actually explaining to you correctly? How do you know when a politician is saying something and they're not just trying to get over on you? Do you trust all of the politicians who are in politics right now? Do you really? Do you trust the government? Do you trust every major corporation that they have your best interests in mind? Because if so, well, then sure, leave it up to the technology to read for you. Leave it up to the calculator to never fail. Leave it up to, you get what I'm saying? But if you have any inkling of this person, this entity, this thing might fail, which isn't even malicious, they just might be wrong, or they might be trying to get over on you, well, then you need to be highly educated. And I don't mean going to school. Obviously, school is not doing any sort of education for anyone, but you need to be able to grasp information and use that information effectively. You need to be able to process information, and you need to be able to understand what's going on in the world around you. That's really, and use that information, right? That's really what an education should do for you. And here's the thing, right? Right now, school's not doing that. Right now, it seems like not very many people know that that is what you need, or if they do know, how to do that. And the less and less people actually focus on that, the more and more our society's education deteriorates. And that just means a bleaker and bleaker future for our children. But we actually have the means to stop that. And it comes down to you as the parent, every individual, to stop that and change that. And we need to do that. Because if not, then by the time our children are adults, they'll be living in a sea of illiterate people. Now, imagine if your child's really educated, but everyone else around them is illiterate. Well, what kind of a lifestyle will that be? Don't you find it interesting when you see a bunch of people perhaps voting one way or saying one thing or another, and you realize these people are not that bright? Wouldn't it change things a lot if everyone just got it, if everyone understood? And you may be thinking, well, we can't have that. But the reality is, we can. It's just a question of education. And if we support those around us to be highly educated, if we support our next door neighbors, their children to be educated, if we support our own children to be highly educated, we can have a much different world. And that's what we're here to do. And so the value of a good education is realizing this. Oh, this is the most important part. This woman is buying lemons from the store when she has lemons in her backyard, just because of ignorance, just because she's not educated on this point that she could just use her own lemons. But the corporations love this. They love that you don't know how to change your oil, or you don't know how to cook your own food, or you don't know whatever it is, because they make money every time you don't know and it's too difficult for you to learn, or that you've shut down your sort of learning process. That's what most adults have done. Not voluntarily, it just is a byproduct of kind of our education system. You see, our education system takes kids and makes learning boring. That's what school does. It makes learning as boring as it possibly can be, so that it drives all the curiosity that's naturally within a child right out of them. And once they do that, then they can be assured that once you get out of school, you're not going to want to learn anything for yourself anymore. Now, that does not mean that, oh, the answer is just homeschool. There are limitations there as well. However, it is definitely a step up from public school for sure, right? But there is a way that you can keep your child's curiosity intact, their natural ability to just grasp information intact, and actually expand that into their adulthood. There is a way to do that so that they're constantly learning. They're never at a loss. They're never feeling like they can't do something. Imagine if you had that growing up. What would your life look like? Imagine what that would do for your children. And The reality is, even if your child is surrounded by a bunch of other people who just don't get it, they will be at an advantage because they will know more. Isn't that always the case? Whenever we meet someone who's more intelligent and they're trying to get us to do something, don't you feel perhaps a little bit wary, a little bit on guard because you're not sure if they know something more than you and they're just trying to take advantage of your ignorance? Well, that means you need to know more. You need to understand more. And that's what we need to do for our children. Make sure that they know as much as possible so that they don't get taken advantage of. And so we can't be okay with just, well, that's just the way life is. Every generation seems to learn less. No, 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 no. That is not the cycle that we want to continue. And if you find yourself saying, well, how do I get out of that cycle? Good news. You can go to my website, unlocked.com/microbook, and get a free microbook that supports you with understanding how you can break the cycles in your own life, in your child's life, so that they can live an even better life. That's unlock, ED, as in past tense. You unlocked a door, right? FL.com/microbook. All right, I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye-bye.